Hello, welcome to another housing sector podcast. Today I have with me Elizabeth Taylor from TAPOS or TPAS Cymru. And we are starting this conversation because I saw a post on LinkedIn about a week ago with regards to flooring, and me being new to the housing associations and housing sector. I thought flooring was a key ingredient to a home, but perhaps I've got it wrong. Elizabeth, how are you? Who are you? And what do you do?
Hi Ben. Well, thanks for having me here today. Who am I? I am Elizabeth Taylor, not the original, but and I'm not Seven Husbands in yet, but make it there in the end. So I work as the policy lead at TPAS Cymru, the Tenant Participation Advisory Service for Wales. So yeah, that's me. I'm actually moving to a new role next week, so this is the last of me at TPAS Cymru.
And how's your time there been?
Oh, a massive, massive learning curve. I've been there 6.5 years. Obviously gone through COVID in that point, had a baby, like lots has gone on, and it's just crazy to think I'll be leaving. Like the things I've learned from starting on day one, entering into the Welsh housing, no, it wasn't the Welsh housing, the affordable housing review. It's just walking in there and talking about rent policy on day two or something. I was like, what is going on? So yeah, I've learned a lot.
I've got your title as Engagement and Policy Officer. What does that mean?
So I actually lead on policy, just policy really now. So we talk to tenants about, what's going on for them, like their actual lived experiences before we respond to consultations or try and influence policy areas based on the tenant voice, essentially.
Great stuff. And look, the reason so we're having this conversation today was about that post about flooring, and I believe you've been a key propellant in that area. What's the story with flooring?
Wow. Um, so it all started really with my mum. So I was raised in social housing in the north of England. And my mum had just moved into a social housing property. So she'd originally bought her property, but due to the costs, she could no longer afford it. So she was moved into another social housing property. So when I went to visit her, she had no flooring in the property. And I said naively, I was new to the housing sector, oh, when are they coming to fit the flooring? And she was like, no, you have to pay for the flooring yourself. And I was like, no, because I'd recently just purchased my own house and I knew how much flooring costs,
Yeah,
so a huge cost. And considering, social housing tenants by definition, they need that support. You think, how are they going to afford to go and buy this flooring? So I thought, right, we definitely provide flooring in Wales, Labour government, like it's 100% going to be flooring. So then I started to read up about it, started to ask some questions, and realised that that wasn't actually the case. So initially, I did a blog about, my experiences with my mum, and then did another blog because I went out to see an organisation which was called Green Stream Flooring. It's no longer existing, unfortunately, but they used to provide carpet tiles to, they'd buy them, well, sorry, they'd be donated them from corporate organisations getting rid of them because they were just throwing them into landfill. So they kind of recycle them and then sell them. And then they did that through a community interest company, sorry. And so they got local people to fit the tiles, etc. It was a really great organisation. And but anyway, they did a giveaway day at the end of the month, and I asked if I could go to a day and volunteer and help out giving those tiles out. And I got there, and there was a queue so big for these carpet tiles. So I just started to ask questions, really, like, why are you here? Um, how come you've not got flooring already? They were all in social housing, and the stories, like single parents, fleeing domestic abuse. They had no flooring in their properties. They had toddlers who would be crawling around and cutting their knees and stuff, and then older people in wheelchairs and talking about the dust, and how that impacts them because there's no flooring. And then I remember specifically this one girl who must have been young, early 20s, said that this was the last thing she needed until she would get her child back because her child was taken off her because of
Mm.
domestic abuse and stuff. And so she needed flooring. So I was like, what is going on here? Like, how is this happening, you know? And then I asked a single parents group as well if anybody like who had flooring, who didn't. And the stories again were just shocking, like unbelievable. And so then I just thought, I'm gonna have to keep pushing on this issue, you know, it's huge, it's so significant, it's such a big part of somebody's home, you know, and people saying they weren't inviting people over to their home because they're embarrassed and kids not inviting friends over. It was such a bigger issue than just flooring, you know.
And an issue that we don't seem to talk about. I mean, I assumed naively that homes came with flooring, and when we're talking about flooring, so the homes that don't have flooring, they have floorboards or now the big wooden, plywood, whatever they are. That's all they've got in them. So there's no
Or
carpet, no tile
concrete, yeah.
fittings, no underlay.
So only in the kitchen and the bathroom, so fitness for human habitation standards, in England and Wales said that you have to have the in the bathrooms and the kitchen. So the rest of the house had no flooring in. So people would go into this green stream to get carpet tiles for their children's bedrooms. Um, some organisations, some housing associations and local authorities had like a small budget that they could offer the tenants most in need a small amount of money to help them tile their bedrooms. Um, so yeah, there was nothing, no, and people were having like slugs coming out of the
Mm.
floorboards, and when carpets are ripped up, this was the main thing. This was such a huge issue. Is they weren't only not providing flooring, they were ripping out flooring and throwing it into landfill every time a new tenancy happened. So, and that was again, it could have just been that we changed policies, which was my aim, so that they weren't ripping them out anymore at a minimum, you know. Um, So yeah, I ended up doing a poll with some tenants to kind of understand their situations across Wales, gathering case studies, etc. Um, and then we worked with some tenants specifically to provide them with flooring and get some more media coverage and try and understand the issue to try and, influence Welsh government to change their legislation and also to try and get housing associations to just change their policies internally, see where they could pull some money from to floor these homes. So especially like their void properties, or again to stop ripping carpets out in the first place.
And what the reason they were ripping them out was that due to some hygiene law that said you had to replace them all and it was just cheaper? Could they not have sent in an industrial carpet cleaner for the day?
Yeah, I know. Um, It was to do with just historical policies, and it was to do with things that had been put in place such a long time ago that people were just doing it. The
Yeah,
maintenance team, the contractors were just going in and just ripping the carpet out, and it could have been wonderful carpet. The tenant could have paid thousands, which is likely for this
yeah.
lovely carpet. In fact, my boss had his auntie was in a housing association, and they ripped out she passed away, unfortunately, and he went over to sort the property out. And the maintenance team turned up and were like, "Yeah, we're ripping this carpet out." And I think he said that she'd had it for like a year or so, and it was a lovely plush carpet she'd saved up to buy it, and they were just going to rip it out because that's what's done.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, thrown into landfill, which goes against all the other policies that we're setting in place.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah. It's not just ripping out carpet then, it's as you say, filling in landfill. And what was the response when you went to Welsh Government and said, look, this is a bit silly? What was the response?
so. Take a few steps back. Lockdown put us on hold, so I'd gathered all that evidence, I guess, from tenants. I'm working with an organisation called TPAS, and we were gathering evidence from landlords like why they do that, and everything got put on hold. But then after lockdown, I wrote this report that was launched, and I sent it to Welsh Government and the sector and media and then I began creating these implementation sessions, and these were like sessions with like technical people, asset managers, etc., about how they can begin to put policies in place internally to put flooring in and stop ripping flooring out. So that was the initial step, and I'd invited Welsh Government to attend those sessions. There was pushback about putting flooring in. The reasons they gave were around infestation like fleas, unclean needles, all those sorts
Mm.
of things. But to me, it was more about the choice of like, does this tenant want this carpet cleaned or does they want it removing? It was like
Yeah,
that tenant choice. It just seemed pointless that it was being ripped out. So Welsh government came in and they were at that time, fortunately, reviewing their Welsh housing quality standards. So they were trying to find information about what worked, what didn't work, etc. So they welcome coming to that meeting, and there were a lot of RSLs specifically who were really keen to put flooring in as well, try and figure out mechanism to do so. We had some examples of good practice from like Monmouthshire Housing Association, who had been doing it for a while in their void properties. So they kind of gave us the budgets and like how they made that work, and because it was a lot to do with obviously the financial implication of doing that, but we needed to really understand that social return on investment as well. So once that report was launched and these implementations where sessions were happening, we then started to get um, contacted by organisations in England to try and figure out how they could do it as well, how they could start putting flooring in because it's just so massive. And a lot of the Welsh government initiatives, like I can't remember the name of it now, the grant for people who have not got white goods.
yeah,
Um, a lot of them don't include flooring, and it's the same in England. They don't include flooring. So we managed to get an organisation called Longley Foundation to invest some funds to do some more research on the social return on investment. Um, so that started to get pulled together. But in the meantime, we worked really closely with Welsh Government to look at this standard and how we could make sure that it really included flooring. And then I guess there's no choice then. It's like you have to put flooring in for these tenants.
yeah,
Um, or if you're not going to put it in again, false economy for putting in poor flooring. So just don't rip it out and we've got less landfill. But also like how that in itself supports so many other policy areas, like think about loneliness and isolation. Like it kept coming up about children not inviting their friends over, parents not having other parents over, and how that was impacting their health and well-being, the net zero agenda, affordable warmth, there's so many things, fitness for human habitation, I mean, Future Generations Act, and how children were not getting their best lives. We weren't making sure that the future generations were, in
yeah.
these safe, warm homes. So there were just so many things that we could leverage with, I guess. And to be honest, Welsh government were really welcoming of it, and they thought it was the right thing to do. I think there was that real human element to it, and the same with the landlords. Obviously, there's financial restrictions, and there's so many policies to implement, and so much funds that need to be used to do so, and it's a struggle, but it is the right thing to do, and I think we do need to find the money to do it because you wouldn't live in you wouldn't live in a private rental sector without flooring. And it's just like social housing. We're providing social housing without flooring. It's absolutely necessary. It's not in England yet, and it is being looked at, but yeah.
There are housing associations that are taking up the mantle. It was something I discussed with Greg Reed at Places for People. And he again was quite surprised by it. And it seems that disconnect between the sort of financial side of the housing association that makes their stock, their schemes, and makes that informed decision rather than you say that human approach, which is that this is children unable to play on the floor, toddlers crawling around on dusty floorboards. Okay, look, I mean, I'm always surprised at how surprised I am and shocked at different things I am. How many homes have you been able to successfully put flooring down in? Roughly, that's a big ask.
Well, I haven't
No.
personally put flooring down, but so once in March, at the end of March, everybody has to do a stock analysis. So they need to look at all their stock and see what needs doing to meet Welsh Housing Quality Standards 2023 or whatever it was called. I can't remember. And part of that Welsh Housing Quality Standard is flooring. So people are going to have to give the evidence back to Welsh Government to say this is how much it's going to cost to put all this flooring in to all of our new properties. So it's not retrofitting properties.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So there it's a lot. It's going to cost a hell of a lot of money, and we need to make sure that it's not a false economy for this poor flooring, and that we're looking at real sustainable flooring for tenants. Um, I know that already some landlords, before it was put into Welsh Housing Quality Standards, were running pilots. So they were already starting to put flooring into their void properties to try and get, those harder to let properties let out. And just because, there's so much research that was coming back to say how good people felt, like the housing officers, etc., to give properties to tenants with flooring in. Like it felt like a home and they felt proud to be giving those properties to tenants, and tenants were so much happier. And there was so much research as well about how a tenant is so much more likely to, pay their rent, take care of their property, etc., when they've been given a lovely property to begin with.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a process and it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some time to learn from as well, because we don't want carpets going in and then it then being ruined, it's a huge financial implication. So yeah, it's going to be a process.
It's quite a nice legacy for you, though.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do it alone, like nobody
No.
ever changes things alone, but um yeah, I mean, to know that moving forward, when somebody moves into a property, they're going to have flooring and it's going to be a home, and home is so important, isn't it? It's a safe space. And, thinking about, for me, it was that element of children and young families. Being a mother myself, having young children, imagining them having to crawl around and walk around and fall over and scrape their knees and stuff because you can't afford to provide flooring. I just feel like it was so wrong.
Yeah.
And I think everybody knew it was wrong, but I think it just needed to be addressed.
Yeah. It's such
Yeah.
a simple thing, but when you think about it, and it has such a lasting effect. Okay, what does the future hold for you, Elizabeth?
So I'm actually moving into Welsh Government, into the regulation team just after half term, so the 3rd of March. So I'm going to be going into these RSLs and checking they're putting that flooring in.
Good, good for you.
I mean, I know they have to anyway, but yeah, no, I'll be working with the sector to do what I can to support them really, and to make sure that tenants are getting their homes that they deserve.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your insight into this one, and thank you for the great work that you've done in providing what is the simple thing, flooring for people. Let's get that sorted out moving forward. If we can't retrospectively restore carpets that are now in landfill. Thank you very much indeed for your time today, and let's catch up in 6 months when you're settled into local government.
Well, Welsh Government actually, not local Welsh.
Welsh government, my mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Ben. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Elizabeth.